Okay, so I'm going to be going over the nervous tissue today. So, the nervous tissue is one of the smaller body systems by weight, and essentially, what it does is that um, it doesn't only include your brain and spinal cord, but all of the nerve sensory receptors that extend off the brain and spinal cord. And it's one of the most complex systems in our body. So we have it's split into two parts. So the different location is the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. And the central nervous system is essentially the brain and the spinal cord, while the peripheral nervous system is everything that extends off the brain and spinal cord. For example, like cranial nerves, spinal nerves, and other structures like ganglia. And also, it has like other sensory receptors, like um, it's like all throughout your body, like in your skin, and they're based on different directions that impulses are being sent. So, first we have the afferent division. This one carries information from sensory receptors to the central nervous system, and basically, like afferent as in arrive. So it's always arriving somewhere. So what it means is that it's bringing a message to the brain and spinal cord to the central nervous system. While the efferent division is it carries information from the central nervous system. So efferent as an exit, that's how I kind of remember it. And so carries information from your central nervous system to the muscles and glands of your body. So the information is exiting out of the central nervous system by telling your muscles and glands what to do. We also have the enteric nervous system. And this one controls wait. Okay, so the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system, it's divided into two to or sometimes three divisions too. So we have different parts. So somatic nervous system, this one controls skeletal muscles. So somatic, skeleton. That's how I can remember it. So this one controls like the voluntary or conscious controls of your body. So it's made up of sensory neurons that send information into the central nervous system. And it's basically for special senses like hearing, smelling, pain, heat. And since it's a skeletal muscle fiber, this is under voluntary control. While the automatic nervous system, this one is smooth and cardiac muscle, so it's involuntary. And this one has sensory neurons that send information from your visceral organs like your stomach, your lungs, intestines, and responds by sending message out to your smooth muscles and cardiac muscles. So this one also has the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And basically the sympathetic is the one that is your fight and flight, while your parasympathetic is the one that's dealing with relaxation. And you have your enteric nervous system. This one controls the GI tract, so it changes in your GI tract gives you a sensation of being full, and it pushes food down there, and the hormones are secreted in response to digestion. So your nervous tissue actually has two types of cells. It has neurons, which send electrical nerve impulses, and it's broken into like different parts. So we have the neuron cell body over here, and the neuron cell body is like has different parts to it. So like the dendrites, the and we have the axon going on, and the neuron cell body right there. So dendrites are the one that receive signals from other cells. So they're over here, they're the ones like the other cells send the signals around here. And then for the axons, this one is the one that sends impulses to another cell. So it's like going out from here. So this is the axon helix here. It's the information is coming out. And It has neuron axon. It sends impulses to another cell. So, so over here, this one has the dendrites contain, wait, over here. So dendrites contain a lot of Nissl bodies, mitochondria, and organelles. And the axon is it communicates with the muscle. It's a large area where the axon connects to the body is the axon hillock. And it contains a lot of mitochondria, and it doesn't have Nissl bodies because it's not producing any protons. All the protons in the axon are produced in the cell body and transported to the axon itself. And it has synaptic vesicles, which are small sacs of neurotransmitter found in the axon to allow the neuron to send message to the next cell over. So we have the neuron axon. It sends impulse to another cell. It's at the tip of the axon, and the axon will enlarge a little bit, so you can have like a synaptic cleft. It will create a synaptic end bulb. And basically, we have synapses. Synapses is where like the neuron communicates with another cell. So the tip is the axon terminal, and we have two. So we have the chemical synapse and the electrical synapse. So the chemical synapse is a little bit different. So this one is a little bit more steps than the other one. So basically, the chemical synapse has this one has a narrow gap. Let me draw it out for you guys. So over here, you see there's a gap right there. And in between, and this is called the synaptic cleft. Okay, type that out. And basically, what happens is when the presynaptic neuron, when the action potential reaches the axon end, it would trigger the calcium, right? Calcium then would it's flooding into the synaptic bulb, and then the end bulb would take the synaptic vesicles, move them to the end of the axon, release all the neurotransmitter. So, in simpler words, let me explain it in like a more simple way for you guys. Okay, so the calcium triggers synaptic vesicles to the membrane, and they release the neurotransmitters, which are these guys, right? And the neurotransmitters, they had to be made in the cell body and transported down to the axon so that they are released. So then here, they're released, right? So they enter the postsynaptic neuron. So the neurotransmitters diffuse across the synaptic cleft. They bind to the receptors, which are these guys. So these little red guys bind to here, and then they create kind of a response. So the steps is calcium comes in and releases the neurotransmitters that go to the synaptic cleft, which goes to the receptors. And the con is that this can be kind of slow, but the pro is that you can control how much to release in the synaptic cleft. Let's say you want to have a very, very fast response. You release a ton. You want a slow response? You release a few. With electrical synapses, basically the action potential, right? It reaches the action axon terminal. It creates electrical impulses, and the ions travel straight through the gap junction into the neighboring cell through these guys. And basically, action potential continues immediately in the next neuron. And two neurons share cytoplasm, so they're physically touching, so there's no synaptic cleft. The ions move directly from the presynaptic neuron into the postsynaptic neuron. And some examples could be cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and it's common in different parts of the brain. The chemical one is one's acetylcholine, oxytocin, and those ones. Let me clear. Okay. So we have different types of neurons. We have multipolar, which has three processes, most common, and most of your more neurons need this. Bipolar, these are for your special senses, smelling, seeing, and then your ear. And this one's very rare. unipolar, second most common. It only has one process sticking off of it. It's common in sensory receptors. It can sense pressure, pain, and different types. Because if you feel pain, right, you want to feel it right away. So it's unipolar, it just goes quickly like that. Okay, so we have corpus of touch and laminated corpuscle, which is two flattened discs as part of their sensory receptors, and they can feel things like deep pressure or deep touch. We have type 1 cuteness. This one is the tactile epithelial cells that are in your sternum basale. And yeah. And then, so if something brushes against the skin, it would trigger this neuron to your central nervous system and tell your body that you got touched by something. While the nociceptor has specialized sensory receptors on it, and it's basically a naked nerve ending. So you feel pain, it immediately senses it. So basically, you have sensory neurons that take information from sensory receptors in your brain and bring to your central nervous system. They tend to be unipolar. While interneurons within the nervous system, these neurons take information from a sensory neuron and relate to the propriate neuron. Motor neurons, they take information from your brain and spinal cord and it exits out to your peripheral nervous system. So it talks to various muscles throughout your body. Okay, neuroglia. They're smaller than neurons, but they're more numerous. They make up about 50% of the volume in the nervous tissue. And glia, they can go through cell division. They can replicate. Neurons cannot do this. So there's four types. There's four in the central nervous system, two in the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so the CNS, astrocytes, they do a lot of things. They provide structural support. They can hold things in place. They have a cytoskeletal filaments up within them, so they have like strength to hold up the neuron. They secrete chemicals that generate the blood-brain barrier. They have a chemical barrier that protects the central nervous system, prevents harmful substances entering into your bloodstream, and then helps with the fetus, the growth and development of the embryonic brain by they help with the growth. So astrocytes overall help with the growth of the brain and the central nervous system, and they maintain the environment for neurons. The so includes the homeostasis of the ion concentration and the nutrients that are in the central nervous system. And they're kind of like the cleanup, and they also form memories too. Okay, oligodendrocytes. So they have processes that stick of it, and each process kind of wraps around the axon to help protect a myelin protect and create a myelin sheath to protect axons. And these essentially increase the speed of which a neuron can send an action potential. So it just makes things like send faster. Microglia. They're kind of like phagocytosis. That's what they do. They're like macrophages, but then macrophages can't go to the blood-brain barrier. So what does the um central nervous system do? They have their own. They have microglia cells that kind of just like engulf anything like that's trash. Ephedema. They're in a single layer. They kind of line up the central nervous system it's filled with cerebral spinal fluid. And they kind of monitor the cerebral spinal fluid, make sure it's like proper concentrations, ratios, sure everything and nothing dangerous is running through cerebral spinal fluid. Swan cells, they're kind of like myelin sheath in the neurons. They're kind of similar to oligodendrocyte, except they stick out and they keep their cell body off of the axon. And their functions, they help form the myelin sheath around the neuron axon in the peripheral nervous system. So they have like little rows. So the last wrap contains all the cytoplasm, and they're kind of like referred to as the neurolemma. And we have satellite cells. Satellite cells cover the neuron cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system. And Ganglia is wherever you have like a collection of neuron cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system. So it helps provide some structural support and protection to a neuron. So myelination, it speeds up the action potential in neurons because you want to like speed things up, the things that can be sent across the axon of the neuron. And it's produced by an oligodendrocyte where the cell body's out there. It extends these projections over to the axons. And Schwann cells, they wrap themselves around the axon of the neuron and they wrap their final bit, and the final wrap is the whole cell body wrapped around the outside. And then we have other things like node or Ranvier, which is the gas between Schwann cells and oligodendrocytes. And the neurolemma is the last wrap. Okay. So white matter is the medulla, or the inner region is said to be filled with the white matter. The brain is lighter, and then, yeah, the gray matter is the cortex, or the outside. When the spinal cord, it's a little bit reverse. Spinal cord, the white matter looks a lot lighter. It's kind of like around the outside, while the gray matter is the butterfly shape in the middle. So gray matter is made up of unmyelinated axons, cell bodies, and dendrites, which is why it's gray. So anywhere you don't have myelin coating or myelin sheath, it's going to look gray in comparison. So if you see in the brain or spinal cord, you can see, like, you can expect to see the cell bodies and dendrites of those neurons. White matter is myelinated axons. So it means that there's mostly just axons in that area sending information long distance. And there's going to be a lot on the outside of the spinal cord. Okay, let's look at nerves. So a bundle of neuron axons surrounded by connective tissue. The structure of nerves are similar to skeletal muscle fibers, and we have axons surrounded by Schwann cells making up its myelin sheath. So endoneurium is the connective tissue coating around each one of those neurons. And you have fascicles that bundle up a whole bunch of those neurons together in place. And perineurium, you surround that fascicle by another connective tissue. So we have, and then also we have perineurium, you surround the fascicle by another connective tissue. And the epineurium is you take multiple fascicles and you put them around, you surround those particles by another layer of connective tissue. And then we have ganglia. Ganglia in the peripheral nervous system, you have a collection where you're going to see lots of cell bodies together. And it sticks right next to the nerves, and they're filled with cell bodies that are surrounded by satellite glia cells. We have our tract, which is the bundle of axons surrounded by the connective tissue in the central nervous system, and applies to the spinal cord in the brain. And these axons usually have a myelin sheath around them, so they're going to appear as white matter. So the nucleus in the brain is used to describe a bundle of neuron cell bodies in the central nervous system. Since cell bodies don't have myelin sheath, they're going to appear dark gray. And it's kind of like ganglia, but inside the central nervous system. And then we have neuron regeneration repair. So nervous tissue has plasticity. So plasticity means you can change over time, over the course of your lifetime. And so basically, when you have more information, you grow more dendrites to receive that information. You can make more synapses, which is how you have new memories. But then they're very bad at repairing themselves. So it's very difficult to grow a neuron, let alone repair one. So that's why um it's hard for adults to like repair. In kids maybe because they have more stem cells, but in adults you don't really have that much options. And how you repair it is if the cell body is damaged, the whole neuron dies. But if it's damaged a little bit, and it can be repaired if it is myelinated and surrounded by Schwann cells. So Schwann cells kind of break up. The myelin sheath will start to break up, but the Schwann cells will remain together as a neurolemma, and they fuse together to form a regeneration tube. And the running through the center of the regeneration tube can repair and regrow itself. But this only happens if you have peripheral nerve damage, like if you get a really deep wound, sometimes you can lose sensation to the tip of your finger.